Trying to understand the vital context in which young Don Gaetanino Lalomia lived, grew up, and reached his human and Christian maturity, particular attention must be paid on the reconstruction of the historical events of his time and their consequences on the civil, social, and family environment in which the child, the boy, and finally the young man took his first steps.
A precious tool in this operation of historical reconstruction is represented by the chronicle by the Anonymous of the Gangitanos family, an unknown writer from Canicattì, who, for about 60 years, from 1792 to 1852, was able to collect and to echo the great civil and ecclesial events of the homeland and island history for the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, as well as the big and small news of the local city chronicle, thus leaving us an account full of details on the period and the vital context in which Don Gaetanino was born as a rich one and grew up.
The decade 1830 to 1839, corresponding to the early childhood of our Don Gaetanino, opened in Canicattì with the arrival of two important news. On November 12, 1830, through a royal decree, the news of the death of King Francis I of Bourbon arrived. He was succeeded to the throne to the Two Sicilies by his son Ferdinand II, still 20 years old. The new king appointed his brother Leopold, Count of Syracuse, as well as General's Lieutenant for Sicily, who arrived in Palermo on March 12, 1831.
On the 30th November 1813, Pope Pius VIII died in Rome after only 20 months of reign. The news is learned in Canicattì only on December 28th. On the 2nd February 1831, the conclave led on the election to the papal throne of the Cardinal Mauro Cappellani, who took the name of Gregorio XVI.
On March 3, 1831, at his father's house in Canicattì, the seventh son of Don Niccolò Lalomia in Safonte and Donna Eleonora Lalomia in Lichiavi was born. The next day, at the baptismal font of the main church of the city, he received the name of Gaetano.
On 7th May 1832, passing through Girgenti, His Royal Highness Leopold Bourbon Sicily, General Lieutenant of the island, was welcomed in Canicattì. After receiving the homage of the clergy and the city authorities in the main church, he had lunch at the place of Don Luigi Bordonaro in Burgalino, while in the evening he took part in a dance party in the house of Don Raimondo Gangitano. For the occasion, the whole upholstery of the house was renewed, and a rich entertainment of sweets and ice cream was settled.
In July 1832, the countryside of Canicattì was devastated by locust invasion that had hard consequences on harvest and local economy. On July 22nd, in the main church, all the city clergy gathered to pray. Locusts were excommunicated. Prayers were made to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, and the Holy Blessing was made so that God would eradicate these animals. Since 26th of July, these worms left the countryside of Canicattì, moving towards those of Naro and Girgenti. During the winter of 1832 and the spring of 1833, in some fiefdoms it was necessary to scrape the land invested with insect eggs. The operation did not prevent the locust from developing again, but in the following summer the number of insects decreased and the damages to agriculture were reduced.
On April 7, 1834, Don Antonino Lalomia, Don Gaetanino's older brother, died at the age of 12. On June 19, 1834, King Ferdinand II and the Queen Maria Cristina of Savoy visited Palermo, with the retinue of other members of the royal family. In the capital there was great jubilation for joy.
On August 28, 1834, Don Gaetano's family was struck by serious mourning. At the age of 40, his father, Don Niccolò Lalomia and Safonte, died of tuberculosis disease.
In February 1835, Canicattì was shaken by a crime news. A certain Domenico Guarneri was accused of the murder of his wife and the concealment of the corpse, and was sentenced to death. The sentence was carried out on June 13 at the floor called the Folce, by guillotine.
On January 28, 1836, in Canicattì, the bells rang in celebration because of the news that 2 weeks before, Her Majesty Queen Christina had given birth to a son, the Prince Francesco di Paola, the future King Francesco II. The mayor, Don Placido San Marco, organized for the following February 13th also a dance party at the expense of the municipality. However, the common joy quickly turned into mourning. On February 8th, the sovereign died, at the age of 23, for the consequences of childbirth, while there were fears for the survival of the child.
From the autumn of 1836, alarming news of a new epidemic of cholera disease began to arrive from Naples and Rome. In May 1837, the epidemic reached Palermo, where every day people died in large numbers from cholera and nanga. Since the 12th of June, the mayor, Don Placido San Marco, took the first precautions against the spread of the contagion, closing the entrances of the municipality, organizing a cordon sanitaire guarded on horseback night and day, subjecting to disinfection by fumigation the goods arriving in the city, and establishing some places of contumacia, that is, quarantine for all those who came from other cities. Believing then that the disease could be caused by the excess of certain foods, the same mayor went so far as to prohibit the consumption of some food, such as cuccia, bolite wheat, broad beans, and watermelons, whose remains had been found undigested in the stomach of 3 dead of cholera.
The people, led by the clergy, tried to react to the disheartening situation by praying to the Holy Quarantore and carrying in procession the statues of their patron saints. Unfortunately, every precaution proved to be insufficient, and the contagion entered the city, unleashing an epidemic. Since the end of July, the number of deaths from cholera rose rapidly, reaching at least 1310 deaths in 56 days. The anonymous chronicler testifies that in those days, in all the streets of this municipality, one could not hear nothing but weeping, groaning, sadness, bitterness, sighs, and tribulation, because of the family father weeps to his children, to his wife. They mourn every father and relatives. The friend cries to the other friend. In short, from everywhere we cry, and we do penances to appease this flagellum from God. Only on November 27, when the epidemic could be said to be definitely over, a solemn funeral was celebrated in the main church for all the cholera deaths of the city.
The epidemic did not spare even the family of Don Gaetano, who was already 6 years old. On the night between August 5th and 6th, his older sister, Donna Maria Lalomia, died at the age of 18, and for 12 hours there were also fears for the life of Donna Maria Eleonora, his mother.
On the 16th of October 1838, their Royal Majesties, Ferdinand II and the new Queen, Archduchess Maria Teresa Isabella of Austria, married on 19th January 1837, arrived in Canicattì with their entourage, passing from Caltanissetta to Girgenti. The king, after attending the Holy Mass in the main church, and having received the homage of the civil and ecclesial authorities of the city, should have had a fast dinner in the house of Don Francesco Bartoccelli, but at the last moment he decided to continue his journey without stopping, and therefore the population was sorry not to have had the honor of enjoying the sovereign lords in the said house of accommodation.
On May 7, 1839, the new bishop of Girgenti, Monsignor Ignazio Montemagno from Caltagirone, a Franciscan religious of the conventual Franciscan Fathers, was in Canicattì as a guest at the San Francesco's convent to make a pastoral visit to the ecclesiastical community. On May 9th, the sacred visit started with the solemn entry into the main church and the homage of the secular and regular clergy and the city authorities. It lasted 20 days, during which Monsignor Bishop also administered the sacrament of confirmations and held the ordinations in minoribus and in sacris, then leaving for Racalmuto on May 27th. On this occasion, on May 15th, Don Gaetanino also received the sacrament of confirmation. His godfather was the pious Don Filippo Amico. So, as all the events described developed, Don Gaetanino grew up in his house, surrounded by the affection of his mother and family, and was preparing to become a young man.